I'm interested in this because I want to help other architects achieve our real purpose in society, and we're not doing it. We're struggling. And my whole thing is I want architects to be successful because the world needs good design.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. We have a really special guest on today. We've got Patrick MacLeamy, who, among many other things, was the CEO and chairman of HOK in his 50 plus years in the design world as an architect, as an owner, as an entrepreneur, and has also written his book, Designing a World-Class Architecture Firm. And so we're going to do a little bit of a series here of kind of the chapters and some of the ideas that went into all of that. And Patrick has been kind enough to sit with us today and just unleash all this knowledge. So thank you so much, Patrick.
Zach, it's my pleasure. And as I've told you before, and probably many times, my whole idea about writing the book and about doing this series with you is to help other architects design their own world-class firm, or just improve their firm, or do a better job as an architect. As I've said, society needs good design, good solid design, practiced by good, competent architects that know how to do more than just survive.
Right.
Because I think really good design takes a well-run firm. So if I can help people with this, young or architects that are already seasoned veterans, that's my pleasure and my honor.
I love it. That's so helpful, because like we were talking about just a second ago, we're targeting kind of different tiers of folks, some of whom are high school students for the Architectural Foundation in San Francisco, who are just learning what it's like, what a career in design would look like, and deciding whether or not that's for them. We've got kind of the middle tier of, maybe someone has been in the design field for a number of years and is maybe looking to jump out and start their own firm or do something along those lines. And then we've got kind of the seniors or the veterans of the industry who've been doing this a while and are always looking for best practices. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the book speaks to kind of everybody, all three of those sections.
I think it does. Well, there are lessons in it for people that are just starting out, people that are learning how to run their first project, to people that are running their own firm. So everything in between. I'm happy to share it.
I love it. So I think we're going to do a multi-part series, but the one that the chapter that I would like to start with is not chapter 1, but it's just the one that struck me, which is managing versus leading. Right? It's page 57 of the book, and the kind of the subtitles there are becoming a project manager, managing versus leading, a case study on Moscone Center here in San Francisco, and then HOK as a matchmaker. And so I would love to hear just kind of your thoughts, any framework, anything along those lines as to how you came about writing that chapter.
Well, sure. Well, Zach, I started out at HOK before chapter 7. I started out at chapter 1 as a designer. I was hired by Gio Obata, who was the O of HOK and the principal in charge of design for the firm. And I joined when it was just one office, and then had the very great good luck to be transferred to San Francisco to help start this office. And I had never been, I think I've told you this story, but I had never been west of Denver before. I was born and raised in the St. Louis area, in the middle of the country. And in fact, it's even funnier than that. I was almost 16 before I ever saw a mountain or the ocean, if you can believe it. So coming to San Francisco for me was like a dream. And once I got here, I knew that this is where I wanted to be the rest of my life. And in fact, it's proved out. My roots are here now. So in San Francisco, I began as a designer, and then through a whole series of steps, became a project manager. At first, I was managing just my own little tiny projects and designing them. And then one day, the bosses of the office at the time said, Patrick, you seem to have a natural ability to organize. We think that maybe you should think about becoming a project manager instead of a designer. You're a good designer, but your management skills are really even better. And I thought about it for a day or two and decided that I really did like the management side. It was fulfilling to me in ways that it's very fulfilling also to have a wonderful design and to have a design come together in a building. It's also a wonderful thing to have a project come together where the design and the budget and the schedule and the team all gel, where you build that really great relationship with a client and with the contractor, and it all works out well at the end where you got a finished project, a finished building. So I said yes, and I was interested in it. I thought the word project manager means what? Well, that's the person that gets to sit behind a desk and tell everybody what to do, right? Wrong. I thought so, but the term is actually the wrong one, and it's embedded in our profession. Project manager means management, but it's actually about leadership, totally about leadership. There are a few what I would call management jobs in being a project manager. Things like, well, yes, you have to develop a budget for your project, for your team. How many hours and how many dollars are you going to spend to accomplish the different phases? What kind of a schedule are you going to have? And project managers have I used to have the mantra that there are three main things that a project manager does. And I missed the biggest one, but scope, schedule, budget, scope, schedule, budget. What's the scope of the work that we're doing, the project that we're doing? What's the schedule that we're on? And what's the budget? The budget is two pieces. It's what's the budget for my team so that we don't lose money, we make money. And what's the budget for my client so that they can afford to build the building that we've designed. And that's a big juggling act. And so I thought, well, that's the main thing that a manager does is he has to be really good at doing the calculation necessary. And then you just tell people what to do. You know, Joe, you go draw up this plan, and you know, Sam, you do that, and Susie, you do this. And was I ever wrong? What I realized very quickly was that there's a lot about being a project manager that is more about leadership than managing. What's the difference? What's the difference? Well, leaders lead. They don't tell people what to do, they lead. They inspire others to follow. My old partner, Bill Valentine, used to say, what's the definition of a leader? It's somebody who has followers. So it's somebody that people will follow and accomplish some great objective, like finishing that project on time. Or in the military, it's the lieutenant or the captain that will lead the troops into battle, and they're first. They're at the point of the spear. And the project manager is that in a certain way. It's not into battle, but it is battling over all the obstacles that can come, that can be in the way of accomplishing a really great design on schedule and on budget. So I learned that managers are really the servant of the people that work for them. It's not the other way around. The manager, if you had a typical organization chart, would show the boss on the top, and there'd be a bunch of little boxes under the boss. It's actually doesn't work that way. It's the opposite. The boss is at the bottom. Why? Well, because in a very real way, a good leader is a servant leader. Servant leader means somebody that looks out for all the people on his or her team and make sure that they have the information, the guidance, and the tools to accomplish their work. Because when you're a manager, you don't actually get to design the building. You don't actually get to produce the building. That's the project architect's job. You get to, kind of like an orchestra leader, make sure it all comes together. So you're not actually doing the work, you're helping other people to do the work.
Right.
You have to be aware of how they're doing, and is there harmony on the team, and are they getting along well together? Or are the consultants flowing, is the consultant information flowing properly into the design team at the right times? Or if you're in construction, are you keeping up with the contractor? The flow of questions from the contractor, or the submittal, hey, I wanted you to pick the colors last week, what happened, kind of thing. So working with people and getting people empowered, that's an overused word these days, but what does it mean? Well, it means thinking for themselves, that they're not like little robots that are taking orders from a manager. They're like people that you've raised up in your family and taught how to think for themselves. And how do you do that? I'll give you an example. So let's say that there's some issue or problem on your project with how things are going. Maybe you're behind schedule. Why? You have to find out. That's what I call run toward trouble. How do you find out? Well, you go sit with you get out of your office or from behind your desk or out of your cubicle, and you sit with your team and you start listening. Say, okay, team, I understand, and you understand that we're a week behind schedule or a month behind, whatever it is, or we're over our budget. Let's understand why, and then go around and let each person tell you what he or she thinks. And just giving people permission to tell you things will finally embolden them, give them the courage, because nobody likes to give the boss bad news. Nobody. Mm-hmm. I didn't when I was young, and nobody else does either, I'm sure. So people need encouragement to tell the boss something that they think the boss might not like. Like, well, actually, the reason we're behind schedule is we haven't solved the detail problem at this part of the building. Or because we've got this big coordination issue with some engineer and it's unresolved, and they said they get back to us, but they're really honked off at us about it. And the chief engineer for that project left on vacation. So we're kind of dead in the water. So every problem like that has a solution, but you have to be willing to run at it, to run toward trouble and figure it out. And you don't do it as the lone manager, you do it as a member of a team, so that you get other people the idea that, oh, they have my permission to go solve a problem and see how far they can get to solving it themselves, so that when we talk about it the next day or the next afternoon, we're all on the same page, and Susie has made great headway because she took the initiative. And maybe it also means that Susie sometimes, or Johnny, will make a mistake and miss the solution and get us up the blind alley someplace. That's part of learning. That's part of growing up. You have to be able to fail and then get lifted up by a good leader. A good leader gives people the permission to try stuff, some of which will fail, and then to learn from that failure and get better. And the greatest joy that I've had as a leader is seeing the younger people, usually younger, on my team exceed my expectations, become self-realized, run toward trouble people in their own right. And that's a wonderful thing to see. It's a blessing.
I'll bet. So you just said a bunch of things there, which I think are those are contrary to, I think, when I think of like typical leadership training, yes, or, just kind of standard stuff you might have read, or the, right, the short class that you might have taken, when you got promoted or something along those, right, lines. Right. There's some ideas there that are flipped, which I love.
That's right. Well, it's counterintuitive. Well, the boss is supposed to be the person at the top, and the boss is the one that makes the decisions and gives the orders. Well, it is true, Zach, that the boss gets to decide certain key things. But actually, it's a little bit like a team and a coach. Good analogy. A sports team, the manager is kind of the coach. The coach is, if the coach is a good coach, he or she is the one that melds the individual players into a great team. Teams win by teamwork more than they win by individual stars. Getting people to work as a team means, in football, it's 11 people, and in basketball, it's 5, and so on. In baseball, it's 9. getting that team to be better than the sum of the parts is the job of a coach. Now, the coach also works on individual skill with each player, but they work a lot on teamwork. And teamwork is the thing that lifts up everybody and makes a good design team into a great one, and means that the possibilities for a great project are improved. So and the coach isn't, in any sports team, the coach is the one person not allowed to go out and play on the field.
Right.
So the
Right.
coach has to work through the players, and it's just like that. I do get a chance as a leader, a project leader, to make some key decisions and decide who's going to be on my team, or maybe change out somebody if they're struggling. That's the other thing, Zach, is that let's say you have a team and somebody is not performing well. Maybe they're in over their head. And so you take the time to sit with them, understand how they're doing, understand how other people think they're doing, and maybe they are in over their head, or maybe they're just intimidated, or maybe they're misplaced. Maybe you've got them in as a project architect role, which is more technical, and they really should be a design assistant helping them, the head designer instead, because their skill sets. So understanding those people and placing them in your team is crucial.
Right.
It's not just your team. Again, let me just go to another piece of this. The architect doesn't work alone. There are engineers and other consultants that the architect typically engages. So they become part of the extended design team. And those individuals, those people, need to work as seamlessly with your team as your internal architect's team. And then finally, the contractor and the owner. Well, we all work for the owner, and I think too many architects forget, this is incredible, but who pays the bills? The owner. A lot of architects believe that the project is theirs, that the owner exists to give an architect an opportunity to design something and express him or herself. And that's true, but it's the flip side of that's much more important, actually, which is that the architect exists to help the owner get the building the owner needs and wants. And from all my 50 years of experience at HOK, I can tell you that the best projects that HOK ever designed and had built, were because of a close collaboration with the owner, really listening to what the owner had to say, and not just saying, I know what to do, just get out of my way and let me design your building. Because owners have ideas too, and some of the best buildings come about because of that collaboration, that interaction between the owner and the architect. Now, finally, the contractor. And Zach, I'm not sure if this is all in chapter 7. It's probably, I'm bouncing around as usual.
That's okay.
But let me just say, I think we've gotten this. I was taught incorrectly when I was in college studying architecture and working in the summer. I was taught the architect is on this pedestal designing, and the architect is along with doctors and ministers and so on, are pillars of society. But contractors don't care about design. They just care about money, speed. And if they can cut corners, they will. So contractors were viewed with somewhere between great suspicion or people who want to undermine the great work of the architect. And actually the opposite is true. If you're going to have a great building, the contractor has to be your partner.
Right.
Partner. 500 years ago, when architects were members of building guilds, the mason stone in Europe in the 1400s, they were building these huge, great Gothic cathedrals. There weren't architects and contractors, there were builder guilds. And the stonemasons guild was the ones that put up these great stone cathedrals. Who was the designer? It was the head stonemason, usually an older man, and mostly men in those days, older man who knew exactly how to design using stone. How high can you build a wall before you had to buttress it? How far can you span with an arch, and so on. The young stonemasons, guess what they got to do? They got to sit in the stone yard and chip away at stones. The intermediate masons would come and mark the stones with chalk, say, here, Luigi, cut this stone to this shape. And so Luigi, for several years as an apprentice stonemason, would do nothing except dress out stones and cut them to the right shape. Once they got pretty good at that, maybe they're good enough, they'll let them lift a stone and put it into place. But you got to start at the bottom. So I think the architect, the designer, I'm going to say, and the builder in the stonemasons guild were the same.
Right.
It was all one team. And starting in about the Renaissance, about the year 1500, architecture and construction began to diverge until today. An owner has to go through this crazy idea that in order to get my building, I have to hire an architect with a contract and a separate contract with a contractor. And then if there are any problems in the middle, they just have to kind of duke it out.
Right. Point fingers at each other.
It's a terrible way to organize for success. So I'm pleased to see that design bid build is beginning to go away, to be replaced by design build or other arrangements where the contractor and the architect are forced into a partnership between design and build. And I'm totally for that. I think it helps. In chapter 7, I do talk about Moscone Convention Center in San Francisco, which was for which I was the project manager, and for me, it was drinking from a fire hose. I learned so much on that project. It was hot political potato in the city. There were groups. This being San Francisco, there's always going to be somebody against everything. But there were groups that did not want the convention center to be built. They forced the convention center to be built underground, 40 feet into the ground, because they didn't want a big boxy building looming up above what was the south side of Market Street neighborhood. And I learned as much from the contractor on that project as I did from anybody, because the owner, so the city of San Francisco, hired the contractor as a construction manager, Turner Construction, out of New York, made him open up a new office in San Francisco, hired us to be the architects, and sat us down in a room with each other after we were selected and said, here are the rules. You're going to work together from day one. And if you don't work together, I'm going to fire one or both of you.
I love it.
This was Roger Boas, Chief Administrative Officer, who in World War II was a tank commander under General Patton in Europe and helped to liberate Paris. He was one tough cookie, but he forced us to collaborate. And what we learned is, hey, these contractor guys are really cool guys. And it got to the point where we did what we should have done anyway. As we were designing, Turner was involved with us. Guys, that's going to be really difficult for us to build. Here's a suggestion maybe for a little different thing that might make it easier for us to build it, but give you the same result. And we began to develop this easy working relationship as a team, just like we did with our own people in-house. And so working as a team with Turner and the city was a wondrous thing. And the experience of with all of the political opposition swarming around the project, we managed to get that building designed and built successfully. And I remember the last day, and this is the other thing architects have to learn, while we're designing and building something, maybe we could say that it's ours, it's my building. I designed it or I built it. The day that we had the ribbon cutting, the owner had a little party for the design and construction team. And we felt a little bit saddened because we were giving away our building, but it was never really ours. It was the owners. The belonged to really the people of San Francisco, not to us. But we had a special role in putting that building together, designing it and creating it and getting it successfully built that I will never forget. It was a thrill of a lifetime for me. I've repeated that thrill many other times since, but it's the first time I really had that working relationship between all the pieces of the team. Let me just interrupt 1 second, Zach.
Sure.
Do you hear the leaf blower?
A little bit, but it's not.
Is it okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds maybe louder to me than it does to you.
Probably on your end a little bit.
I've got a Jabra speakerphone.
Oh, gotcha.
Hooked up in a USB port.
Gotcha.
Hopefully it'll work.
Yeah. No, it should be. I think it was fine. I could hear just a little bit in the background, but
Okay.
my light was flickering too, so we'll edit all that out. But,
All right.
Okay.
You want me to talk about, I didn't tell you the toilet seat story.
Yeah. Do you want to jump into that real quick?
Yeah,
And
sure.
then I was going to see if you had enough time too, that maybe we could go to company culture is crucial as kind of leadership and culture as well. But if we run out of time, that's okay.
Where is that?
That's chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Yes, I do have a hard stop at 4.
Okay. I mean, if you're up for it, I'd love to do these kind of piecemeal, and
sure.
Risk management as well is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, because that's what I do, and I'd love to get your opinion on those.
Zach, you're a really good host because you ask me a good question, you sit back and you smile and you nod, and I just talk.
I mean, you're doing me a huge favor, but I've also found it's the greatest way for my audience to get the most, which is just
well, and I love doing this. I hope that the young architects and the not so young get something from this and are inspired to become better.
Right.
And that they're better able to serve in their capacity as architects. Our world is so screwed up with not very good design.
Right.
It really needs it. All right. So anyway, let me just say the toilet seat story, because it's a good story that people usually enjoy.
Okay.
We had a project to design a courthouse, and I was a project manager. Courthouse in Oakland, California. And the client was the city and county of Alameda County, but the actual user of the courthouse was the judges. And our client so became the chief judge, who was a woman judge. And so she attended all of our design meetings and asked questions and was a really good client. And when it came time to design her chambers, the chambers for all the judges were all the same. And the judges' chambers, for those who haven't been around or seen one, is just a small office, usually directly behind the courtroom, with a half bath, a toilet and a sink, place for a judge to hang his or her robes, and so on. And it's also where a lot of cases get resolved when two opposing parties are called back into chambers. Let's go into my chambers and discuss this. So it's an important part of the building. So she called us when it came time to program what the chambers were going to contain. My designer and I went in to see her, and she called us into her chambers. We had our meeting in there, and she said, "Now about the half bath." Said, "Let me show you something." She opened the door to her half bathroom. There was a sink there, a white porcelain sink. There was a white porcelain toilet there, but it had a black toilet seat with a split front, And she pointed to that. She says, "I don't want that. That's for a man, and I'm a woman. I don't want a split front. I want a full round or oval toilet seat, and I don't want black. I want white." And so we said, "Oh, okay, yes, Your Honor. That's a perfectly easy request for us to take care of." We wrote it down. I took the notes, and I gave it to a secretary back at HOK. This is before voice notes and computers and so on. This is still typing up stuff, really clunky. And the secretary typed the notes up, and what do we do with the notes? We put them in the file cabinet, in a file folder. And 2 years later, the building was under construction, and I went on a tour of the building. They were installing the toilet seats had been installed, and I went to the judge's chamber, and then I remembered, and I looked down at the new toilet. It's got a black toilet seat with a split front. Oh, I was embarrassed. How the hell did this happen? Well, it turns out that we had no good way In the old days, we called them tickle files before the computer. We have no really good tickle file, a way to remember something important from 2 years ago and remember it 2 years later when it's time to make that decision. So our specifications writer, who was the one that specified things like toilet seats, just went ahead and put in the standard black toilet seat with a split front. And it was embarrassing because we promised her. So I said, all right, we're gonna take care of this. So we changed out at HOK expense all the toilet seats in the courthouse. It wasn't a big thing. It wasn't a big expense, but it was the right thing to do. So it caused me to begin to think about something that that I realized for us to really do a good job as architects, we needed to have a memory like an elephant. We needed to remember important things and remember them at the right time. And by that time, computers were beginning to be used in architects' offices, not by the designers, but by the accountants and the secretaries and so on. And I said, you know, the computer has a memory like an elephant. There's probably a way for us to have a tickle file that's built into a computer program so that something that's important doesn't get lost and stored away in a file cabinet someplace. And that led me to eventually become one of the founders of what became known as Building Smart, which is, I'm an architect, I'm pretty good at designing. The human brain is really good at thinking about lots of diverse topics and things and coming up with a way to organize those diverse things into a design, a singular design, a building. Architects are not particularly good at adding up dimension stringers, remembering how many cubic yards or square feet of this or that there are, or adding up the cost of the building. Those are all tedious, they're important things, but they're tedious, and the architect is wired to not do the tedious things as well as he or she should. So we now have a solution. We have computers that can take that tedium and remember things that are important, freeing up the architect to do what we should have done in the first place, which is be really, really good at designing. And so that's another book and another conversation with you someday. But that's what that is about. That it caused me to start thinking deeply about there's got to be a better way. Otherwise, we're going to get crushed. And the bigger and more complex the buildings, oh my God, a hospital, research laboratory, or a big giant airport. There are thousands of these things that you have to remember.
Right.
And, it's beyond the scale of the human brain. I don't care how smart you are. So fortunately, we have computers now and programs. So
I love it. So I have to know, did you ever see the judge again?
I did.
Okay.
At the dedication, and I'll tell you honestly, I never told her that we had seen the black toilet. I didn't have the guts, but she said, you know, everything looked great, and I'm really happy. So I said, thank you, Your Honor. That's just what we want to hear. And that was it. But I put it in the book, so it was kind of like confessions.
I love it. No, it's so important, right? I mean, people don't often get to see the little things like that and fully understand what it takes and the ownership of going back and changing something that needed to be changed, right?
Yes.
It's an idea.
The typical thing, you know, is for the architect to say, well, the contractor did that. I didn't do that.
Right. Right.
Or it was that dumb engineer that did that. Well, part of my learning, my education on the job was there's great, huge benefit to having somebody put their hand up and say, I'm responsible. That was my fault. Let's fix it together. It takes all the tension out of the air. It dissolves so many potential conflicts. So I've even apologized for things that I didn't do just to clear the air so we can move on.
Right.
So in this case, it wasn't expensive to fix it, but it triggered this whole thinking process that led directly to the foundation of Building Smart.
Right.